Hello, hi, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We will now start our panel, the last panel of the day under the green financing section. And the topic will be ESG disclosure, focus on social impact and corporate governance. Before I go into the details, may I just share with you some of the logistic housekeeping rules that this room actually will have to be cleared sharp at 12:30 for the next event that they will have a Prime Minister coming in. Yeah. So as the last panel, there's a kind of disadvantage for us. But I hope that we will actually work together to ensure that our panel end on time. So now go back to our topic. You may just ask the question that why actually when we talk about ESG, but this panel we focus actually not really on the E, the environment, but very much on the S and the G around the social impact and corporate governance. Yeah, so there is a reason behind it, because we trust that while other panel already discussed quite a lot around the E, but we want to explore in this panel the actually impacts of the social disclosure and corporate governance around the green financing. Because whatever we do, whatever we plan, but the being able to actually complete the finance closing for any green project to ensure that the green banking actually will promote more of the ESG initiatives, especially in the context of an emerging market like Vietnam, whereby the first ever regulations that require on the carbon emission declaration just came up last year, and the enforcement, may we agree with each other, is still not yet that strong. Yeah, so with such a kind of ground laying, we trust that the panel will actually give us a lot of interesting food for thought, and I would suggest that we will actually run about 2 rounds of the questions here with the panelists, and then we're going to open the floor for the audience. And the first thing, just to start, may I ask each of the panelists to have 1 minute, yeah, to introduce yourself. Thank you very much. So may I start first? Thank you.
Hello. I am Vin. I'm come from Dragon Capital. I'm a part of ESG core team, and I'm leading the responsible investment at Dragon Capital. We are a fund manager operating in Vietnam for 30 years, of which we have a 20-year record of ESG journey. And we manage approximately about $5 billion at the moment, and we invest on behalf of our investor. And most of our assets under management is allocated to public equity and bond fund. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Marnix Monsvoort. I work with FMO, the Dutch Development Bank. We provide equity and debt for a variety of countries, largely in the financial institutions, renewable energy, and agri-food and water segments, including forestry. My role is the director for the financial institutions department, transitioning into director for the energy department.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Hado. I'm the head of infrastructure, government, and healthcare sector, and also head of the ESG solutions of KPMG Vietnam and Cambodia. We actually finding out that infrastructure sector and ESG are just very much intertwined in terms of green financing, in terms of renewable energy, in terms of decarbonization and energy transition. So very glad to be here today. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Nam. So I'm the founder and climate advisor in one consulting and services firm, namely Cleanova. So I'm the advisor for policy development in Vietnam, mainly in sector of green and green transition. Our services not only support for developed partner on policy development, but also we support for enterprises on the transition in greening, because we know that it brings more competitive for Vietnamese enterprises in Vietnam. So happy to be a panelist today to talk about the ESG and with the impact of social impact. Thank you.
Xin phép được nói bằng tiếng Việt. Mời anh phiên dịch hỗ trợ giúp mình với. Tôi là Trần Anh Quý, tôi đến từ vụ tín dụng các ngành kinh tế, phòng công tác là phòng tín dụng chính sách của nhà nước, và phòng tôi là đang được lãnh đạo ngân hàng nhà nước giao cho nhiệm vụ là triển khai thực hiện cái nhiệm vụ của ngành ngân hàng, thực hiện cái chiến lược quốc gia về tăng trưởng xanh, cũng như là các cái chiến lược về sự phát triển về bền vững, thực hiện một số các giải pháp về hỗ trợ của nhiệm vụ của ngành ngân hàng, thực hiện cái nhiệm vụ về thực hiện cái cam kết COP26 của Việt Nam. Đến hội nghị hôm nay thì rất mong nhận được các cái góp ý và các chia sẻ kinh nghiệm của các chuyên gia từ các tổ chức tài chính quốc tế, cũng như là các tổ chức doanh nghiệp, các tổ chức tư vấn, đóng góp cho quá trình hoàn thiện và xây dựng cái chính sách của ngân hàng nhà nước. Xin hết.
Hello, very good morning. My name is Juhan Kim, the new country director of the Global Green Growth Institute Vietnam. I just arrived 3 months ago here in Vietnam. So the Global Green Growth Institute, otherwise known as GGGI, is an intergovernmental organization solely dedicated to the green growth and the net zero transition. So we basically do 3 things to the government. So number 1 is a policy advisory in terms of net zero transition. And then also second, the investment mobilization towards that transition. And the third one is a capacity building. So here in Vietnam, we are providing certain type of technical assistance to the green bond issuance. And also we are mobilizing finance for the bankable project in number of industry, basically that needs to be transitioned to that requires to have a greener transition. And also we are working on the startup and SME financing and investment as well. So good to see you, everyone.
Hi, thank you. Because the mic is with you, yeah. May I just start our panel by asking you the question, yeah? Because GGGI has been quite active recently, not just only global region, but also in Vietnam, yeah? In terms of promoting green bond, green financing. May I ask you to share your views on the landscape of the actually ESG disclosure in terms of the green financing, and I wish to hear your input on the landscape of the region and also in Vietnam. And please, other panelists, you are more welcome to join, to share your view on this. So please, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. Well, before I directly address your question, I heard that this panel is specifically related to the social part of ESG. So I just wanted to share the couple of conceptual notions that I have. Well, I started my career as a sustainable development expert for the last 18 years. So when I first to the private sector and the business sectors, like 17, 18 years ago, when I was working for, there's an initiative called the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, and then I wanted to address this kind of risk, these kind of things as a potential risk to the business sector. But more than 15 to 20 years ago, nobody was listening from the private sector. So, I mean, I tried to meet with the important decision maker level in the companies, and then nobody was interested. Now we have a ESG boom, like for the last couple of years. Everybody's talking about ESG, but at the same time, I mean, that's a very welcoming movement, but at the same time, we are also facing the fallbacks, like how robust we are talking about ESG. I mean, in terms of real sustainable development, the real challenge. So we're talking about greenwashing, and then some other the side effects of the movement of ESG. So I always quote the one from the former Unilever CEO, Paul Pullman. He said, the businesses cannot succeed in the society that fails. And then, well, if I add more, then societies cannot succeed in the mother nature that fails. So that's why we are working on this whole net zero transition. And then this, the statement tells a lot. So, I mean, if society fails, you know, there's no raison d'etre for the business sector. So we must deal with the social part of ESG. That's a mandate of business. So now we are talking about, maybe you can put it as the stakeholder capitalism versus shareholder capitalism, or you can deal with many different you know, things. But I guess this whole movement needs to be, you know, somehow mainstream. So that's the first thing. But in terms of your question, in terms of disclosure and the details, so how the social impact, the social related indicator has been calculated properly in this market and then properly reported. Well, it's pretty much to say yes or no, because there's no standardized indicator properly for the social sector, so to speak. And then I had a very, well, on the one hand, we need to focus on strengthening the quality of indicators in the social sector. We deal with the gender, the boardroom diversity, and all kind of things when we talk about the S and G, but we can't really depend on the perfect indicator, so to speak. So I really enjoy listening the previous panel. The gentleman from Fin Rating, he said that if the European investors or a foreign investor wanted to invest in a certain type of project in the company in Vietnam, then they ask a lot of ESG disclosure. But for the Vietnamese companies, it's a cost to deal with. They go to the factory, check, you know, workers, how old they are, and then, you know, they check the supply chain. It's a cost. So from the grant provider perspective, like us, we are very interested in terms of how we can provide support to make this kind of transaction fast, as long as the companies here in Vietnam who wants to get an investment are fully dedicated to the net zero transition in a socially net zero transition with socially just manner. My last point is about, so what should be focused here in this market in the context of net zero transition? It's more like, well, we talk about net zero transition, main thing is energy transition, and then we need to discard, you know, we need to phase out old technology, and then we need to convert into new technology. Then you have an existing industry, and then there are workers, and then there are a lot of people living depending on that, you know, industry. So we need to think about how we can phase out the traditional industry with traditional industries with a new industry, but we need to, the government and the international organization and then even business sectors needs to think about, an investor group as well, to think about how we can make a technical and vocational educational training to minimize glitches between those transitions. So I stop here.
Thank you very much. So, you know, we understand that you just shared that social indicators, why it's very important for the ESG disclosure, but how to ensure that the companies can comply and use and report on social, such a kind of indicators, because to a lot of companies in Vietnam, that's still, you know, reviewed by them as a cost, and how we, you know, at the relevant stakeholders can come in and provide the support. And one of your solution suggestions would be the training, right, raising the awareness. Yeah, I would love to hear more from the panelists on this, how you see the landscape of the ESG disclosure, you know, in the region and in Vietnam from your own experience. Anyone want to share your view on this? Em có muốn không? Hay là anh Vinh, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. ESG disclosures, especially from frontier market like Vietnam in general and even emerging markets, I think it's still very immature stage. We have been investing here for 30 years, and the journey with ESG for 20 years we're having, and we thank for IFC that is the early investor that helping us in this journey, and you know that it's for Vietnamese market. I think it's similar to everywhere that we still very limited data information available on ESG. We see that it's not only limited, but when the company even report their ESG data information is very inconsistent. And I think that in previous panel also discussed, and one of the panelists in previous panels discussion was saying that probably the regulator need to provide more clearer guidance, right, on ESG reporting. We have been, for us, we try to, for the last 2 years, we try to engage with different data service provider, Bloomberg, Repress, ESG 17, and then climate institution in Holland and others. What we try to do is survey, see whether is there any opportunities from these data service provider can help us enhance our ESG information. Unfortunately, we cannot be able to getting service to anyone. Because a very simple question, simple answer is garbage in, garbage out. If the company don't disclose information, the AI, the machine learning thing that we will be able to capture the data. So this is a great issue, and I agree that raising awareness, the critical importance, and reinforcement on the ESG disclosure in Vietnam is critical. Yeah.
Thanks, Anh Vinh, and we have a comparison of the ESG disclosure requirement for the listed companies in the region. And here we are not talking about like the whole Asia Pacific. We just make the comparison among the ASEAN countries, and we still think that in terms of such regulatory enforcement, actually Vietnam still has a lot to do, right, to catch up. And unfortunately, without the mandatory regulations, then ESG will be still viewed by entities as a nice to have, but not a must to have, and that will actually lead to a various sequences, right, whether you can access to the green lending, green bond, green financing for those, all of those. Now, leveraging the point, because we talk about regulation, enforcement, mandatory requirement, I wish to direct my next question to Nam. Nam, because as a very active boutique consulting firm in ESG reporting, disclosure, may we know what is your view on the state of regulatory readiness for ESG disclosure for companies in Vietnam? Thank you.
Yeah, thank chị Hà for the question. So because I'm a support to Vietnamese government for several policy on green transition, including the ESG. So right now in Vietnam, we already have some existing regulation to request the enterprises to have the ESG disclosure, but follow the circular number 96 of Ministry of Finance. That the ESG disclosure only voluntary report by enterprises in Vietnam, excluding some they already have in the stock market or someone to develop some some bond or want to go to the stock market. So again, in Vietnam we have almost mainly the SME enterprises. So that's why now only the voluntary disclosure from these enterprises in Vietnam. So it's quite hard. I agree with Mr. Vinh or Mr. Kim that it should be the enterprises or factory or company in Vietnam should to go to the ESG disclosure. It's under request by the buyer, the main buyer, mainly on the supply chain main buyers it's not requested yet by the government. So that's why the challenge is a lot of policy is not yet enough enforcement to bring the mandatory reporting from the Vietnamese SME enterprises. So it's a very big gap because mainly the product is export in Vietnam is come from the small and medium scale SME. So it's something is already running. However, right now I'm joining other activity is some policy developed by Ministry of Investment and Planning. They want to have some subsidy or support for the SME enterprises in Vietnam by some. It's not the money supporting directly like subsidy, but they want to provide some regulation to help some small and medium enterprises have the time and capacity, like Mr. Vinh mentioned, that is capacity important to have the medium and small enterprises have the capacity to understand why is the ESG disclosure is important. And then, of course, some investor like the Dragon Capital Fund or some banker from Europe or even other can supply them in the investment during the supply chain. So I think some new regulation is coming soon, but optimistically I think that the Vietnamese government already consider about the sustainability development for private sector already, but the policy is coming soon in the couple of next years. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nam, for such a kind of like comprehensive sharing about the status of ESG disclosure by the companies in Vietnam. Anyone want to add any more comments on what Nam just sharing? Anh Vinh, I just have a question for you then. So you know, so from the beginning of the panel up to now, we hear a lot about the need for a regulatory framework for the ESG disclosure. What is the SBV actually plan on this? Because I'm sure like you also have a, I mean, among all of the sectors in Vietnam, banks in Vietnam have the highest, let's say, investment, yeah, in terms of risk. And so for ESG, may we take it more in particular the climate risk, climate change risk? What is you know, what is on plan there, you know, in the ESG, in the SBV program, please? Thank you.
Trước tiên thì tôi xin cung cấp một số thông tin liên quan đến việc quản lý về rủi ro về môi trường và xã hội trong hoạt động các tổ chức tín dụng. Thưa các quý vị đại biểu, thì ngân hàng nhà nước thì đã vào cuộc trong cái trào lưu như anh bên cạnh tôi có nói, đó là một cái trào lưu. Thì ngân hàng nhà nước vào cuộc rất là sớm, từ những năm 2016, 2017 thì ngân hàng nhà nước đã có những cái văn bản chỉ đạo các tổ chức tín dụng là thực hiện các cái giải pháp về quản lý, tăng cường năng lực quản lý về rủi ro về môi trường trong hoạt động cấp tín dụng của mình, cũng như là tăng dần cái tỷ trọng về tín dụng xanh trong nền kinh tế. Theo đó thì nâng dần cái trách nhiệm của tổ chức tín dụng trong quá trình cấp tín dụng đối với khách hàng, thì cũng đã lồng ghép các quy định yêu cầu các tổ chức tín dụng phải thực hiện tuân thủ đầy đủ các quy định của pháp luật về bảo vệ môi trường trong hoạt động cấp tín dụng của mình. Cũng như là gần đây nhất thì ngân hàng nhà nước cũng đã ban hành một cái thông tư số 17 năm 2022 là căn cứ trên cơ sở quy định của pháp luật về bảo vệ môi trường, thì ngân hàng nhà nước ban hành thông tư và quy định các tổ chức tín dụng phải thực hiện quản lý về rủi ro về môi trường khi cấp tín dụng đối với các dự án đầu tư có tác động xấu đến môi trường. Theo đó thì đến hiện nay thì qua công tác theo dõi thống kê báo cáo của các tổ chức tín dụng, thì toàn hệ thống tổ chức tín dụng thì đã có 42 tổ chức tín dụng triển khai thực hiện cái quy trình quản lý rủi ro về môi trường và xã hội, và tổng cái dư nợ mà đã được các tổ chức tín dụng quản lý về rủi ro môi trường là chiếm đến đã đạt gần 2,7 triệu tỷ đồng, chiếm trên 21% tổng dư nợ đối với nền kinh tế của cả hệ thống các tổ chức tín dụng. Và cái xu hướng này đã có những năm gần đây đã có mức tăng rất là cao. Đến tháng 6 đến tháng 9 năm 2023 vừa rồi thì chúng tôi đã thống kê và tổng dư nợ đến tháng 9 thì đã tăng 13% so với cả cuối năm 2022. Về công bố cái ESG của các tổ chức tín dụng thì hiện tại toàn hệ thống ngân hàng cũng đã có một số các tổ chức tín dụng trên cơ sở là được sự hỗ trợ của các tổ chức tài chính quốc tế cũng như được khuyến cáo, và trong các văn chỉ đạo của ngân hàng nhà nước thì đã thực hiện công bố các cái báo cáo ESG của mình. Và theo đánh giá của ngân hàng nhà nước thì tất cả các chính sách của ngân hàng nhà nước trong thời gian từ năm 2016 đến nay thì về cơ bản các tổ chức tín dụng đã thực hiện đầy đủ và phát huy được những tác động tích cực đối với cái việc mà xanh hóa các hệ thống ngân hàng cũng như là các cái chủ trương định hướng xây dựng các hệ thống ngân hàng xanh tại Việt Nam.
Thank you very much for sharing. I mean the how to say the SPV activities around the credit rating and you know like risk testing for the climate change and especially for the banks. And because that's what we hear from the State Bank of Vietnam, yeah, the one that who actually set out all of the monetary, regulatory, and that's why I just actually wish to also address the question to another representative from another bank, but this is a Dutch development bank, and I wish to learn more about actually what FMO, when you come here as a development bank, you also, of course, encourage the companies to engage more in the ESG activities. So can you share with us then, from your own perspective, what companies should actually do and engage in the ESG activities, and how you know the FMO and the development bank will, how to say, offer the support to such companies? Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for that question. Of course, the first question that companies have to ask themselves, and financial institutions as well, is why to engage in ESG activities? Because if you just consider the costs, it may not be prominent enough in the decision making. I think everywhere in the world, and also here, people want to be considerate of the impact of their activities on planet and people. I was just in Travin yesterday, visited an offshore or nearshore wind farm that we are indirectly invested in, and you see all sorts of cafes and little restaurants popping up around that, because looking at a wind farm has become also a touristic activity almost, or family outing. Now 2 miles south of there is a coal-fired power plant. There are no cafes and restaurants around. So that's one thing. I think what was already said is a positive engagement with ESG activities and standards helps to attract capital. Not just the green bonds, as you said just now, but also if you're looking for equity, for international investments, pension funds, institutional investors, they want their investees to adhere to certain minimum ESG standards. Customers that you want to engage with also expect in their supply chain that their suppliers adhere to certain minimum standards. Talent, especially the millennials, they have a completely different view on the places where they want to work. They need to be good for the planet, not just profit-oriented. So there's various ways in which it helps to create value, which is the positive side of it. If you look at it more from a defensive perspective, a good environmental and social management system helps to prepare you for regulatory changes. And I hear about the circulars that are being issued by the SBV, and I can assure you there will be a lot more to come. So if you don't want to be surprised by new circulars and needing to implement changes quickly into your company, but you want to extend the pathway that you have to respond to these things and be proactive about it, a good ESMS helps you to prepare this. And not just regulatory changes, but also stakeholder requirements, not just your shareholders, but the whole ecosystem of stakeholders that you have. And last but not least, it helps to protect your reputation. You don't want to be involved in court cases, in all sorts of things that taunt the reputation. As the previous panel said, it's not only that you want to focus on good things that will happen, but you should also prevent bad things to happen. So if you have a lower chance that you are involved in negative issues, it avoids so much more cost than the small cost that you have to invest in upfront. To quote an old saying, the reservoir of goodwill takes years to fill and hours to empty. So if you're talking about what we do as FMO for our investees, both on the debt and on the equity side, we have an ESG tool that we have launched. It's online, it's on our website, and we conduct various webinars to make people familiar with how it works. We actually had a webinar yesterday. There were 500 people, of which 6 from Vietnam. So it is already there. What does it do? Of course, you first need a golden source. What is that here? I think the UN principles of responsible banking are a good starting place. So this tool helps you with your ESG assessment of your portfolio and your clients. It helps you to set up and administer a grievance mechanism, and it enables you to do more inclusive access to a capital and thereby to expand your market share.
Thank you very much, and I think it's just great to hear and such a support FMO provides to companies in Vietnam. As an emerging market, we're sure that we need more of the support from the organization like FMO or GGGI to really promote the level of awareness, provide the education, the training, and more important, the real pragmatic support solutions to help the companies. Now, when we talk about the green financing, so far we have discussed a lot around the ESG disclosure. We also discuss about like what companies have to do, whether they are already really ready for the disclosure. Then, because our topic, the whole broad topics is about green finance, I just really wish to explore more, from the perspective of as a kind of, let's say, investors, yeah? Then how the investor will come in, look at a target, and then decide that, hey, whether this kind of target actually meet the ESG requirements that I put up, I set out for the investment. So actually, this question I will go to Mr. Vinh from Dragon Capital. And Vinh, so in terms of the ESG contest, right? Can you share with us more that Dragon Capital, when you come in and you look at all of your M&A activities, what actually certain criteria or standards you use to assess the S and the G perspectives of your investment portfolio? Yeah. Thank you.
So, thank you, Jiha. First, within the responsible investment spectrum, the responsible investment spectrum have a vary. Probably, for financial institution, you can look at that, and probably they have about 6 different approaches. Some company will use single approach or combined approach. The first thing is you say basic, negative screening, exclusion, and then ESG integration, corporate engagement, and then we have a positive screening, thematic investing and impact investing. So the more you go to the right-hand side is more impact generation. At Dragon Capital, our approach to responsible investment is all about looking at risk management. ESG integration is our strategy, and we seek for adjusted risk return, right, from the investment, and hopefully we'll be able to create a long-term values for our investor. So what we're doing right now, because of the greenwashing, I just want to make a clear positioning of Dragon, that today we don't have yet any fund we label ESG fund. We don't have any fund actually that, we call impact investing fund, right? We use ESG integration and incorporate ESG in our investment process. And for the social pillar, we adopt, for E&S, we adopt IFC performance standard. Particularly for social pillar, we're looking at, when we're approaching the company, we see whether if company using a child labor or forced labor, because that is a part of our exclusion. We will walk away from the investment. We don't want to involve in that risk. If the company is eligible to further screening, we will try to assess the company labor working condition. If you read, if I need to share with you that, every time I read the sustainability reporting or ESG reporting from listed company, I could say that, the length of 50% of the report talking about CSR, charity donation, which is good. But, this is not exactly the institutional investor like FMO or Dragon and others is really looking at community that we really want to looking at. That's a small community, your employees, your employment, to see whether if the company will be able to provide a desirable workplace for the employees. How do they take care of their worker health and safety and well-being? That's the first thing we want to focus. Now, when we're talking about community, based on performance standard at IFC, outside of the internal employees, then we're talking about a community surrounding the area where the company have the operation or have the factory. We want to see how the company engage with the community, whether they have a system in place to be able to identify and mitigate the risk or negative impact from their operation with the community. And then, particular for big projects like infrastructures, agriculture initiative, mining and dam and others, we're looking at, land acquisition and involuntary resettlement. This is addressed about, human rights, to see whether if the company have a proper compensation, a fair resettlement with the community. Then the last thing we're looking at, the social factor, is about indigenous people and cultural heritage. For corporate governance, we adopt this OECD 5 principles, and we adopt Vietnam corporate governance scorecard. And for corporate governance, we interested looking at the board, the role of the board and responsibility of the board directors. We want to see, the independence of the board, the competency of the board, the diversity of the board. Then we move down to see whether if the company have set up a proper corporate governance process to manage properly the company. How do they treat the shareholder? And we addressed it, through the questionnaire about, equitable treatment of shareholder and the stakeholder engagement. And lastly, a part of ratings too, communication is one of the 3 factors that we try to manage to rate the company, that how much company disclose information, how much honest and engaged with the investor, with stakeholder. If we approach the company, the management or their board directors, we want to know how much they will be able to share information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you very much, Mr. Vinh. I think that's a very interesting you share, from the perspective of investors. And for KPMG, we also observe the two following points. The first one is, let's say, 2 years and backward. Usually when our client come to us and ask our M&A team to carry out the due diligence, the due diligence always just focus around financial due diligence, tax due diligence. Sometimes they have a commercial due diligence, and sometimes, and much more less frequently, is requests for integrity due diligence. Yeah, but things have changed significantly that we observed in the last 2 years. More and more we see the request for the ESG due diligence, and actually the gaps identified under ESG due diligence actually determine even the investment amount, investment level of the investor into the target. Another one, the observation is we see more and more, and unfortunately we still see it at the foreign banks, but we think that we see it more. I think the MIC, I mean, they don't love me today, right? Yeah, but whereby foreign bank, they already set out certain fundamental criteria, whereby if, as a kind of lenders, you meet such a kind of requirement, then you can have a certain concession rate. And we have been asked in to actually verify it and ensure that the lender, the borrower, actually meet those requirements. So I think Mr. Kim, as from GGGI, you have any more comments from such a kind of green financing, please? Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. So, just your point about ESG due diligence, I think it's a very important point, especially at this moment in Vietnam. So, your Prime Minister made a pledge at the COP26 about net zero transition, and then the discussion on the just energy partnership is happening. And then today, in the previous session, the lady from EIB mentioned about the 500 million commitment. And then also, I recently met the representative from the GFANs, who is leading the group of the bankers and the financial institutions working on JEPI. So basically, they are waiting for the project with the bankability. But when we talk about bankability, it's not only about the financial, viability, but also the ESG factors embedded. So it's important to strengthen the aspect of ESG factors of the project or the company level. But the question we have, I mean, it was my previous question during the introduction, who's going to pay for it? How the companies here to be benefited somehow to disclose those kind of information? Well, the current regulation is only asking the listed companies to issue the sustainability report, so-called ESG report, but how you're going to deal with the supply chain. The SMEs, Mr. Nam mentioned the SMEs, how to deal with the SMEs. Then it's quite important because from the net zero transition perspective, one of the studies is saying that 30 to 50%, more or less 30 to 50% of investment needs to be made in the SME sector, SME in the startup sector, to fulfill to achieve the 2050 net zero transition target by 2050. So it's not only about financing for the large company, but also the startups. I mean, GGGI is quite interested in the climate tech transfer. We're dealing with the renewable energy industry, hydrogen, the climate tech, ag tech, all this kind of energy efficiency, all this kind of so-called supply chain needs to be transitioned in a way. And then the investors are talking about not only scope and the scope 2 emissions, but also scope 3 emissions, indirect emission as well. So I think, we need to think about it, it can be from the government side and also the stakeholder community like us. We need to develop some sort of, how do I say, strategy to accelerate the movement to develop robust data framework, and then also the quality information from not only from the listed company, also from the SME sectors. And then I just wanted to echo what Mr. Marnik said, that I read a very important article today. There's a movement called climate quitting in the millennial and Gen Z, the workers. So there's a data that in the oil and gas industry, the number of staff has been decreasing for the last couple of years, but they basically quit from that industry because of the ESG related reasons. So there's a data shown. So I think it's the entire community is moving in that direction, but the question is how the public sector and then company can collaborate to accelerate the the transition. So I stop here.
Thank you very much. In terms of the timing, I think that it's the time for us to open the floor to the audience so that you can raise the questions to the panelists. I think that we have a quite great, panelists here because we have the, from the development bank, from the policy, bank, from green financing, advisors, investors. Please, I would like to hear more of the questions on the topic from the audience. So who may want to go first, please? Please, may I ask you to pass the mic? Thank you. And may I ask that the audience, when you raise the question, could you please tell your name and identify where you are from? Thank you.
My name is Amalia Gux. I'm a business consultant. I'm from Romania, living in Ho Chi Minh. And as I'm looking more and more into ESG for the consulting the companies I work with, and I see there is a huge need in this, as we were discussing in the first panel about the green finance. One of the panelists mentioned that there are only, there are 900,000 companies in Vietnam, and only 5% work on their ESG frameworks. And as we were saying, related to ESG, before we start running, we have to do the baby steps. How would you recommend the companies to start on ESG? Or how would you recommend the industry professional, as I am, to start helping companies to transition into more of a, let's say, ESG awareness? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
That's really a great question. Who from the panelists going to pick up the, I think Nam, right? Yeah.
Thank you. So, I'm also the advising on so. Yes, so normally Kinova on our way to help a lot of SME enterprises in Vietnam for the greening strategy on business model. Your question is always come often. And we would love to say that, yes, so to support for some small or medium SME for starting with the SDG framework or even ESG. It's the capacity building is quite important, but the most important is the data. The data of the company or enterprises is very important for everything, for investing, for due diligence, for money from the bank, for everything. But again, so because SDG is not the destination, SDG is a journey. So a lot of companies, they have to be owned by millennium generation, like someone mentioned. The leaders, they understand quite well about the SDG or ESG, but the staff is not ready. Why? Because they said that if they bring some commitment, they will fail in the market. Because it's some competitive, because of the understanding about some commitment is not be achieved. So we suggest don't think or reading some 200 pages ESG report or discover some very big company, because ESG report maybe 4 pages or 5 pages, it's a very simple thing, but it's the commitment with the market that we are in transition time. So I think the data is the collection and report of public is quite important for any enterprises, and it's a starting point. Because if we starting today, next 5 years or 10 years, we have very good data and commit and announce that now we ready with the finance, climate finance, we start to do some mitigation to have some more better life for the labor staff or any with the social impact. So I think it's important is the data. So the data, it should be correct, the data from the activity of the enterprises. It's not the data just for marketing or something, because it's, otherwise it brings some scandal or something, it bring harmful for the enterprises. So with the view from the advising for enterprises, I would like to say that the company should to be improved the data collecting system or reporting system is quite important and the first starting point, and it don't need the money, even the money to hire some consultant. I sometimes joke is if you are do quite good, quite well, so the job of consultant will be less, but we are happy with this process because it work for the busy need and also it's good for the society. Yeah, it's a point I can.
Basically, first the company has to start with a mission. So before having a report, you have to make a mission, which is a mission. As we know, the company mission is not a commitment, but rather I want to start working on ESG policies or to make ESG policies a part of my business strategy.
Yeah, I think for anything is starting from the strategy. So normally the founders, they would like to take some very ambitious strategy or the target. But I mention again, it should be carefully, because if you announce some commitment and you are not following this commitment, it's affect and harmful for the company and business model itself. So it should be bring just because we are just normal and we starting and we are in transition time. So bring very small target, but we achieve it. It is more successful and we bring very high ambitious target and then we fail. So it's something recommend that we are small company, we go in small thing, and it's support for business model, but as well as the support for the society is something I would like to recommend. Thank you.
Thank you, and you know, as KPMG, I also want to add here that please don't forget one of the fact that this is still very immature market. Yeah, if we talk about what the company or how the companies are ready to invest in their ESG activities, right? You know, and I agree with Nam here that, you know, even you come in and they talk about big things they want to do, but then, you know, when it comes to the resources, not just only finance, but also human resources, they are ready to focus on such ESG activities. It's not yet there, right? So that's why, you know, we, for example, KPMG, we launched our ESG solution globally just 2 years ago, right? And, you know, we launched it this year in Vietnam and Cambodia, and of course, other countries in the region, etc. But then what we do is when we have our client, we also have them, like you say, that makes baby steps, yeah? And we also have the clients who actually impacted most. Because we talked about earlier, we talked about the regulatory, right? So let's say that those who are exporters, especially the one who export to Europe, they are subject to CBAM requirement. And if they don't do, like, handle it soon, it just actually impact them. They lose the revenue. They cannot further export to Europe, or they will pay very high carbon tax, etc. So, you know, that's how we start. And I love, you know, what all of the panelists here mentioned, that awareness raising is, I think, that the duty for all of us here in this room. Yeah. So thank you very much. Very nice question. We still have the, you know, the time for 1 or 2 more questions. So yeah, please, the gentleman over there. Thank you.
Hi everyone. My name is Harry. I come from FDI department from BIDV. As you might know, we are like one of the first banks in Vietnam that can be able to issue the green bond. Like a few days ago, we are allowed to issue 2.5k billions Vietnam dong for green bond. So I want to ask Mr. Vinh that like I know that the data source in Vietnam is I mean like not unreliable but still in very like low quality. So how do you can you share some of your experience to us as an providers of source, capital source for project in Vietnam? Can you share some of your experience, like how do you approach the data source in Vietnam in terms of ESG factor?
I think if go to the green bond, it should be Manix to respond much better than me. But in general, yeah, you are right. It's a great challenge for all finance institutions to tackle the ESG data and information here in Vietnam. And I do very much believe that for us, we're talking about our own case. For the last 2 years, we expand our ESG core team. We employ more specialists coming to the company. The only one objective is to engage directly with the invested company. And they are actually now in Hanoi and traveling around to see the management, to visit the factory. That's the only thing for us to shorten the knowledge gap. Because in our rating system, the way we rating and giving a score to the company, we rate their ESG performance. How do they really perform therein as at the factory level? But the total score will be adjusted by the level of knowledge gaps we're having about the company, right? So if we have a larger knowledge gap, we don't have enough information, then that becomes a very high-risk company, and particularly in corporate governance, right? And let me tell you the truth. If we invest in a bad corporate governance company, we normally fail. From our experience for 30 years investing in Vietnam, corporate governance is critically important. It's good corporate governance, especially from the board director. It reflects very well how the company manages environmental and social issues. So my best advice with all company is start from the top. If you're starting with your ESG journey, start from the top. So it means, you know, we have to have this strong leadership commitment from the board directors. And, you know, I agree with Manex recently saying, you know, have to be more proactive. And I remember, you know, Mackens from ERM consultant talking about the journey and say you don't have to go to full speed from 0 to 100, right? So everybody has starting the journey from the compliance, then go to risk management and seeking for opportunity. We also like that. We start from the compliance, now we are in risk management stage and seeking for opportunity. So the board of directors should asking a simple question that, you know, what are the non-finance risks and opportunity in the operation? Do we know about these risks? If we don't know, can we have someone else like consultant come to help us to identify the risks? Do we have the resource in terms of people and budget, things like that? So, you know, in summary, that for Vietnam, we cannot rely on service provider. We cannot rely on company disclosure. We, as institutional investor, we have to engage directly ourselves to shorten our knowledge gap and understand the company better. Yeah. And if we have critical issue that we cannot solve, we engage with third party. They will help us. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can add to it, I love it how these two questions actually relate from the Romanian consultant to you. Because if you get a green bond, it means that the activities that are covered under the green bond adhere to some criteria. And your activities are, for instance, to provide a loan to one of the SME clients that the previous question asker was the consultant of. So her client wants to know what they have to do to qualify to get a green loan from you. So in that respect, banks are a very good intermediary between the green criteria international and the reality on the ground of an SME. So if they come to you and say, what is it that we require to be labeled as a good enough counterparty to receive a green loan, that'll give them the stamp of approval that they are actually a sustainable company with all the benefits associated to it. And well, I know of your good bank, but there are also, of course, a few others in the Vietnamese market that can do this. So the two of you can link to see how you can translate your requirements to the requirements you have for an SME client to be part of this green bond. And that will help your client to see, okay, what is it that I have to do to be labeled a sustainable SME? So, yeah, perfect example of how you can bring the gap closer, how you can bridge the gap to see how on the ground people can prepare on their sustainable journey.
We already issued the framework for issuing green bond, just our internal process. We are still developing that, but yeah, I know it's gonna take a long time, but yeah, we're still developing that.
Sure, it is a process, it is a journey. And then, of course, the interesting bit starts when you are able to issue a green bond. You should derive certain advantages from that. So what are the advantages you can then transfer to one of the SME that can qualify for such a green loan, which should normally be more favorable than just a regular SME loan?
Xin phép có một vài ý kiến đối với câu hỏi của một anh nickname ở BIDV. Phải nói thật là BIDV là một trong những tổ chức tín dụng lớn, rất lớn tại thị trường tài chính tại Việt Nam, và cũng là một trong những tổ chức một trong nhóm tổ chức tín dụng mà thực hiện cái ESG rất là sớm và có những triển khai rất nhiều các hệ thống về quản trị rủi ro cũng như là các chiến lược về phát triển ngân hàng hướng tới mục tiêu về tăng trưởng xanh và thực hiện các nhiệm vụ mà ngân hàng nhà nước giao là đã đạt được kết quả rất là tốt, và ngân hàng nhà nước luôn luôn ghi nhận là cái xu hướng đi đầu của BIDV trong việc thực hiện các cái chiến lược của mình. Về cái quy định về như anh có hỏi về cái thu thập cái thông tin về doanh nghiệp, đặc biệt là thu thập về thông tin ESG của doanh nghiệp phục vụ cho công tác quản lý rủi ro về môi trường trong hoạt động của mình, thì hiện tại đây là câu hỏi mà đặt ra với ngân hàng nhà nước, mà không chỉ BIDV mà rất nhiều tổ chức tín dụng đã đặt câu hỏi cho ngân hàng nhà nước trong quá trình xây dựng các quy định tại thông tư 17. Và bản thân phía ngân hàng nhà nước thì cũng không phải là cơ quan quản lý về nhà nước về môi trường, thì cũng rất là khó khăn, và chúng tôi đã phối hợp rất nhiều với cả Bộ Tài nguyên Môi trường. Ở trong khán trường ngày hôm nay, hội trường ngày hôm nay thì rất tiếc là không còn có đại diện của Bộ Tài nguyên Môi trường ở đây. Tuy nhiên thì tôi cũng chia sẻ trong quá trình làm việc với cả Bộ Tài nguyên Môi trường thì đến bản thân Bộ Tài nguyên Môi trường, cái hệ thống thông tin về môi trường, về tuân thủ về môi trường của các doanh nghiệp, của các khu công nghiệp nói chung thì vẫn còn đang trong quá trình xây dựng và cũng chưa thực sự là mang lại hiệu quả đối với cả các công tác khai thác thông tin cho phục vụ của ngành ngân hàng trong quá trình quản lý rủi ro về môi trường do các doanh nghiệp họ khi vay vốn tại các tổ chức tín dụng của mình. Tuy nhiên thì chúng tôi cũng đã cố gắng liệt kê tất cả căn cứ trên quy định của pháp luật về môi trường là luật bảo vệ môi trường cũng như các nghị định số 08 năm 2020 của chính phủ, thì chúng tôi cũng đã list được 8 cái nội dung liên quan đến nguồn thông tin để thu thập phục vụ công tác bảo vệ môi trường, bao gồm có từ các cơ quan quản lý nhà nước, từ các hoạt động, từ cái hồ sơ dự án cũng như từ các cái thông tin từ các phản ánh của các cơ quan quản lý nhà nước trên địa bàn cũng như các chính quyền địa phương, cũng như đến từ cả các hộ dân, người dân ở xung quanh các cái khu sản xuất của các doanh nghiệp, Rồi thì những thông tin thu thập từ chính tổ chức tín dụng phải đi khảo sát khách hàng, cũng như là thu thập các thông tin từ các trang web, các cái quy định theo quy định của pháp luật về bảo vệ môi trường tại các trang web, các địa chỉ web của cơ quan quản lý về môi trường. Theo đó thì hiện nay thì chúng tôi vẫn tiếp tục phối hợp với cả Bộ Tài nguyên Môi trường trong quá trình nắm bắt các thông tin, các khó khăn vướng mắc, cũng như là các giải pháp của Bộ Tài nguyên Môi trường để hướng dẫn các doanh nghiệp. Ở đây là đặc biệt là như các anh các chị vừa đề cập là đối tượng là doanh nghiệp nhỏ và vừa, chúng ta rất khó khăn trong quá trình quản lý rủi ro với nắm bắt thông tin về thực hiện cái ESG của họ. Tôi cũng hy vọng là với tất cả các trách nhiệm chính trị cũng như là trách nhiệm về duy trì cái hệ sinh thái cũng như về phát triển bền vững của nền kinh tế Việt Nam trong tương lai, thì tất cả các tổ chức tín dụng có mặt ở đây cũng như các chuyên gia cũng như các doanh nghiệp cũng như các công ty tư vấn sẽ nỗ lực hơn nữa để chúng ta có những cái sớm đạt được cái mục tiêu net zero sớm hơn năm 2050 theo mục tiêu của cam kết của chính phủ đã cam kết.
Thank you very much for the sharing. And like I just mentioned as earlier of the section, we have to clear the room strictly sharp by 12:30 so that they can prepare the venue for the Prime Minister. So I just would like to thank the audience for your, interaction and attention. And also may I ask you to join me to give an applause to the panelists, for their sharing. Yeah. Wishing all of the best, and let us work together for a greener Vietnam. Thank you.